Wait, where did I put my lucky rabbit's foot?
I'm Prudence. You can call me Prue.
Mason.
And so we kind of are the lucky rabbits, and we get to invite other lucky rabbits into the warren if you want. And so our guest today is Kiley, and I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Kiley Wilkins O'Brien. I am a friend of Prudence and Mason's. I'm very, very lucky to call myself their friend. I am a certified death doula, a licensed social worker, and I have a master's of public policy. And I've made it my life's mission to help us as a society destigmatize death and get more comfortable with death and dying, because death is a inevitability, not a possibility. And a lot of our ails in society, I think, come from people avoiding that reality and not being prepared and experiencing trauma when there's an unexpected loss. So yeah, that's me.
I love
Awesome.
it. Very well said. So the first question we're going to ask you is actually about your doula work. How did you find it? How do you feel like the process goes? Do you feel like, I mean, I know that you feel like it's work that you really love doing, and I think you're someone who's got the mentality. But go ahead and let us know, like, what was your first experience? How did you find it?
Sure. I'm going to try and make this not too long of a story, but everything that I do is rooted in my personal lived experience. And at an early age, when I was in high school, I was in a very close to fatal car accident. So I almost died. I had a near-death experience, and that really shook and shaped the way that I think about death and dying. And it became an incredibly lonely place because not a lot of 17-year-olds are thinking about death and dying. And it was something that then also sparked my interest in suicide prevention, because that accident folk thought was a suicide attempt. And so then I got put on suicide watch, and I was treated like I was suicidal, even though it wasn't an intentional attempt on my life. I would have classified myself as ambivalent and careless. I could have been more careful, but I wasn't actually trying to die. And so it just got me thinking about the way that we treat people who are experiencing thoughts of death and dying or have had near-death experiences. And I carried that with me into college. So that was my senior year of high school. And then I went to college and I majored in anthropology, which is the study of culture. And in different cultures, there's all sorts of different ways that people process death and dying, experience death, different death practices. And then when I got out of college with an anthropology and sociology degree, I did not have a job that I could easily step into. So I ended up becoming a social worker. And through social work, I did child protective work. I did work in long-term care facilities, and I worked in the jail and prison system. And in all of those things, there was this universal suffering of humans were suffering, and I was trying to alleviate their suffering. And then this gets us into the conversations about the medical industrial complex and oppressive systems and how people in their environment are not able to thrive. And yet we want the person to change themselves to be able to cope with the oppressive environment, rather than saying what in the environment needs to change in order to help this person to choose life or to live a better life. So I still have my social work license. I earned it. I worked really hard for it, and I'll keep it. But I found that in the doula practice, I got my certification in 2022 through the University of Vermont School of Medicine.
Amazing.
Thank you. The doula practice is great because doulas don't diagnose, they don't have to document, and they uphold people's dignity. And so for me, doula care is great because I don't have to worry about being a mandated reporter. I can just listen and receive whatever this person needs to share. The doula care practice comes out of the long-term care and palliative care movement, which is like hospice, if you're familiar with hospice.
Yeah,
Yeah. So it comes from the hospice modality and methodology, but it's not clinical. So the doula is the person who treats the emotional and spiritual needs, and then also is just helpful. And so if you really think about it, doula care is like a midwifery, or like back in the olden days, like the women's work, the witch work. Like it is about helping the least of these, being a recipient of people's ails, and then doing whatever you can to try and alleviate their suffering. I always say it's about like turning towards people who are suffering and attempting to allay their distress. So it's more heart work than it is clinical, and that's what I'm so drawn to. And I am a pioneer in the space, if you will, because I think I'm the only death doula who primarily focuses on people experiencing suicidal ideation. And I think that it's so important for us to reimagine how we treat people who are suicidal. Because as I mentioned, when I was treated like I was suicidal, it was so oppressive. They took away my dignity, my consent. I was told how I could behave, where I could go. I needed a chaperone with me places. I wasn't allowed certain things. And in my experience, people who are experiencing suicidal ideation are typically people who feel very oppressed already, and being restricted more is not helpful. So instead, taking that palliative care, that comfort measures, like what could I do in this moment to help you feel better just for a minute? What could I do for you right now that might alleviate some of the pain that you're feeling? And thinking about like pain as not just physical pain, but emotional pain, spiritual pain, all financial pain. Like there's so many reasons that people are hurting, and then being curious. Yeah, being curious.
I think it's really interesting to draw a parallel between the social work and the doula work, right? Because there's two parts of our life where we're the most vulnerable, and it's the beginning and the end, because it's you're less able-bodied, maybe mentally you aren't developed yet, or you're starting to be in developmental decline, or even just the stress, right, of suicidality is like, can cause enough trauma to be almost like brain damage, even if it's temporary or long-term, right?
That's been scientifically proven too.
Yeah.
It's just depression and suicidal thoughts have been linked to a lot of brain damage.
And some of it's cyclical. I was looking today at a study where people get almost addicted to cortisol. Like they start to stress themselves out because it feels like the natural state for them, which I think goes into, right, like changing the actuality of how we treat people and how people get to live their lives.
Yeah, a lot of work that I do is with law enforcement, first responders, and military veterans. And there's a few reasons for that. One, I don't document, diagnose, or disclose, so I'm not going to share their personal stuff with anybody else. And in those professions, like you don't necessarily want that on your record. But I think that what you just said about the cortisol addiction, there's also a piece of that for adrenaline as well. Like folks who have been in combat, folks who have been in these high stress situations, they can get like addicted to that adrenaline rush and then engage in really risky behavior as a result of just wanting to feel that, because you can become numb when you're so used to having really high levels of cortisol or high levels of adrenaline, and that numbness it feels suffocating. And so how do you break that? Well, it's by engaging in something that maybe I'll die, like who knows, that risk
and behavior for sure.
They'll like take another tour or something.
Yep.
And come right back out.
And it's like a dropping of the value of life almost, right?
Right. And the other thing that I think is really important to mention is moral injury. And so moral injury happens when you have to do something that goes against your own personal moral or ethical code. And that happens a lot in those fields because you have orders that you have to follow. So a very easy one, for example, is like you're a sniper and you're told to kill someone, and you know that killing someone is wrong. Like that is going to cause like this fissure in your spirit. You're going to be broken by that. For me, it was being a child protective worker and being in a situation where I knew a child was unsafe, but my supervisor would not let me remove the child, and then something bad happened to that child. Like I felt guilt. I felt like I had known better, but I didn't get to do what I was told internally to do. I didn't get to follow my gut. I had to listen to the powers that be. And I think a lot of us experience moral injury and don't even know it or have the word to describe that. And that's why doula care is so important to me. It's that spiritual work. It's that soul retrieval work, finding those pieces of yourself that got chipped off and healing them. And I think it's so important for people to have safe places to do that. Like we talk about our in social work, we talk about our body mind, right? Like our body and our mind, but we forget the soul. And so I love doing the soul work.
Yeah, we've been talking to energy workers actually. And that's kind of it, right? Is like we are all energy, and if that energy gets blocked or if it gets harmed, then it's a chain reaction that starts to hurt your heart and like how you feel power and your mental side. I've never really gotten into Reiki or anything, but these people who do it, they really have the energy of someone who can help you carry through. They're almost like life doulas in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So there's the part of helping people to realize what parts of their life need to die so that they can live more fully. Because, like the death tarot card, right? Like it's transformation, really. I don't necessarily think of death as like a big scary thing. I think we are all born knowing that we will die. And so if you can get comfortable with that and understand that death and those moments where you feel like you might die, that's telling you something. It's telling you that something in your environment is not right for you, for your body, mind, spirit. You need something to change. You need a transformation so that you can live without that feeling. And then that's like such a big piece of it for me is helping people to understand that that's a message that you are giving yourself. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to be locked up. It means that something needs to change. And then the other piece is like helping people who are terminal cross over in a very dignified way. I want everyone to have a good death and whatever that means for them, because it's so individualized. When I worked at the nursing home, I attended many people's deaths. I am so honored that I was a part of that journey. Some people waited until the person who lived across the country made it into the room and then they passed. Some people waited until everyone was out of the room because they wanted to be alone. And so it's very personalized, it's very individualized. And as a doula, it's my privilege to like question people about what their wishes are and to remind them that in this moment, it's all about you. You can release people pleasing. You do not have to worry about what other people think because you're going to be dead. So
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that makes sense, right? One thing I want to go back to real quick is with tarot cards, the death card represents that, but I've been seeing, I just did a reading. I've been doing general readings for the first time. And I saw the Tower card in hopes and fears position of a Celtic cross for the general public. And I realized that when you, like the Tower card is about the foundation that the tower is built on, not being strong enough to withstand storms, right? And the silver lining of that card is always the foundation was never going to hold. If it's not a sustainable part of your life, if it's not feeding you, supporting you literally, then it has to fall down. The tower has to fall down so you can rebuild it somewhere else, or you can work on foundations. And that has to do with that same, like recognizing what parts of your life have to die, unfortunately, like metaphorically, obviously. But what needs to be cut out to rebuild, which is a really beautiful way to address death in general or suicidality. I know it's a hard thing to say, but there is a silver lining kind of in terminal illness. And that's what I'll say from personal experiences. I had 3 deaths in like very short span of time. And one of them was very sudden. And so there was no reconciliation on my part. And I know that they had a lot more to live for, and they didn't get to kind of be comfortable or get a chance to get things settled before they went. But the other 2 deaths were unfortunately cancer, and that was very hard to watch on their end. But for both of them, I know I had an uncle who was very spiritual, and he was able to tell everyone, he was like, I have 3 days, get everyone together, let's all talk about things, let's reconcile this. And then another one was my aunt, less spiritual, I mean, very religious, but that she was able to handle more of the clinical side as far as getting a file together so that everyone had everything they knew. She was able to just make sure that people knew. We were all able to say goodbye. You know what I mean? And so at the end of the day, if there is that silver lining and you can have a doula to help you do all of that, I mean, I think some people do doula work without even realizing it.
Yeah.
She yeah, she had a lawyer who was able to help her get all of her files together. And then at the end, because I know from listening to other doulas, it's not just the before the death, it's the after the death, right? It's the making sure that the
Oh,
family,
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, a big part of doula work is grief work as well, because it's the helping the person come to terms with their death, or their death experience, or their death song, or whatever you want to call it, their personal journey. And then it's helping those around them also. It's being the mediator in the room when your loved one is saying, I don't want to do the treatment, and the spouse is saying, but I want you here longer. It's like helping navigate those difficult conversations. And it's also, after the person passes, being there for them and being able to remind them of, like, this is what your loved one wanted. This is so that they don't have to make all those difficult decisions in grief, because grief, it robs you of your ability to think rationally, and it crashes over you like waves. And grief really needs to be witnessed. And I think that a lot of what we see in like trauma work, like in communities where there's been a sudden loss, or, like, I would be remiss if I didn't mention, in Maine, we had our first deadly shooting, and the response to that has been, so filled with grief and loss and disappointment, because that's just not something that had ever happened in Maine before. So being able to respond to those communities and witness the grief and allow people, because our society in, especially in New England, is a lot of like grin and bear it, and that damn Yankee kind of like, oh, well, that's not polite, we're not going to talk about that, we don't cry in public. And I really live my life very vulnerably and emotionally, because I think that it's so important for people to know that we are human and we need to express our human emotion. When things are sad, you can cry. There's reasons you should, because it's good for you. There's catharsis in crying. There's like hormones that are released through your tears that do help you to feel better. So just allowing people space to be witnessed in their suffering. If they don't want to do that in public, you can come to my house and cry on my couch, and I won't judge you. I will offer you a cup of tea if that soothes your soul.
yeah. I mean, and we can speak to this. I mean, you really mean that. Whenever we've been able to get over there, it's always just a very comforting time. I know even Mason, who doesn't go there as often as me, anytime he's had a conversation with you, we get in the car and he lets out a sigh of relief. Really, you help people feel seen. You help people really take some context towards how we're feeling and work through it. And I can't thank you enough for being who you are. Really, I mean, and especially this podcast and my practice, you really have fostered it and given me kind of a role model, really, realistically. And even in your relationship with your partner, we've kind of looked at you guys as role models, and just thank you, really, because it's not just in the death that you're able to help people. You're really helping people move through life also.
That's so affirming, and you give me way too much credit. You always do. So thank you so much. I'm very, very glad that I was able to support you in becoming, because you are so incredible, and everything that you two are doing is exactly what is needed in our world right now. So we're just thrilled. Sam and I are thrilled to see you thrive. And the other thing I just wanted to mention was that death work is life work, right? Because there's that term memento mori, from it's Latin, it means remember death. And it is not remember death to be a morbid little emo baby, which I am, but it's remember death so that you can live more fully. If you know that you have this one precious life, like Mary Oliver says, like, you will remember to enjoy the little moments. You will be brave and take a risk that you maybe wouldn't have taken. I think there's a lot of people who are restricting their joy. And if you know that this is your one beautiful, precious life, then you're willing to lean into the joyful moments, and also know that the painful moments will pass. And if they don't pass, it's just the end, and that's okay.
Yeah, there's in art history, there's a really I can't remember what period it was. Probably, I want to say the Renaissance, but there was another quote that came up a lot that would be written beneath someone who was dead, and it was, "As I am, so shall you be," which is exactly kind of what you're talking about. It's not something that you can prevent. It's an inevitability, and that's just a reminder to live your life, like appreciate your health, appreciate your space, and appreciate those around you for sure.
Yeah.
Because you won't be able to be there for them forever. I think a lot of us want to always be able to support the ones we love. And spiritually, I believe that when we pass, we're able to do that, but recognizing it is never going to be easy for the people who are left behind.
Mhm.
And we'll always carry those people who we've lost. But yeah, being able to recognize that that's coming is something that's going to help you recognize that there's a lot of value and joy and beauty day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said about your spiritual beliefs. And I think that that's important to mention here too, is that like, I do come from, I come from an Irish Catholic dad and evangelical Baptist mom. So there was a lot of different church offerings for me growing up. But it turns out that my Irish Catholic dad is actually a pagan, and the Irish Catholicism was cover. So I've always
Catholicism really is very witchy. It's very ritual.
Absolutely. Got our herbs we're swinging, and we've got our enchantments that we're singing. And so I have been a practicing pagan since I was like 14 or 15 years old. And my comfort with death also is very rooted in my belief in like regeneration and the wheel of the year and how like the seasons turn. I tend my grief in my garden because you can't just receive all of this suffering and loss and be present for people without it weighing on you. And so I just go and I put it in the earth and I grow beautiful flowers with it. And then those flowers die every season. And then, I trust that their roots are still in the ground and that they will come again in the spring. And that like tie to nature and living in Maine where we have 4 seasons and being able to witness the passing of time. I think that helps a lot. I think that, I don't think linearly, I think cyclically. And I think that that cycle of birth and death and regeneration is so important. And I wish that that was more present for more people who, have this Gregorian calendar that they follow instead of the seasons and the moons like I do.
Yeah. I mean, the cycle I've been noticing. So I've been doing those astrology forecasts every single night, and even the sky is all cyclical. Literally the wheel of constellations and houses. Yeah, absolutely. In seeing the moon, specifically the moon right now has really been pulling kind of. It's a full moon. And last night I really thought I was going to go to sleep pretty early. And it was like, I felt like I was being pulled, like the tide to be up, I joked with Mason. I was like, I felt like I should have been dancing around a fire with Kylie last night.
I would have loved it.
Yeah. But I love that. The cycle of life and death, because realistically, all of our atoms have been part of something else. All of the water in our body has been rain. All of it has been in the ocean. We're really connected to the earth in ways that we don't, or we're less likely to acknowledge.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it's so important for folks to, even if you don't want to like attribute your spirituality to nature, to reconnect with nature, because we have so much that is artificial that surrounds us all the time, and it's so valuable and so like therapeutic for your nervous system to co-regulate with the earth. So finding, even if it's just like finding a communal green space, not right now because it's winter, but and just like, or going and watching the waves crash, like there's such beauty and such like comfort in those things that are eternal.
Yeah, one thing that I really admire, one of our friends, James, dips in the ocean every morning. I checked in recently. I was like, are you still doing that? And they they will literally cross town, find their spot on the beach, and they will dive in the water, at least for like a polar dip every day. And they say that it's really like helped them mentally like stay sharp, stay aware. And I admire it. I don't know if I could do it, but I couldn't do a lot of the things they do. They're really a powerful person.
That's very impressive, actually.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, even just walking to the beach every day is like an intentional act of taking control of your day for the rest of the day.
Yeah, and knowing that you're going to be jumping in an ice cold
Very
body
brave.
water is impressive.
One thing I do also want to talk about is like the formation and how you're doing with Covenstead. I know the woman who runs Evo, right, has officially joined the team.
Oh, yeah, Katie from Movolve is
Well,
yep. She has been my personal trainer for like 6 months now. I have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is a connective tissue disorder. So it makes all of my joints really wiggly and I dislocate stuff a lot. I know. So Katie has been helping me to improve my joint strength and my flexibility and mobility. And she does some amazing group classes. And so she's going to be hosting a joyful movement class here. So Covenstead is the company that is me. It's a sole proprietor LLC, and it's my way of describing my anthropological, so my cultural and my thanatological death practices. So I use my powers to influence public policy. So I am contracted with the state of Maine, Department of Defense, Veterans, and Emergency Management to lead a suicide mortality review committee development. So we'll be developing a team of people who are going to look at the root causes of suicide in the state of Maine. I serve the VA and SAMHSA nationally, doing similar work across the country. And that is all done through Covenstead, which gives me a little bit of pleasure to make the government contract with a witch.
absolutely.
My logo is a cauldron with sparks shooting out of it, and Covenstead literally means witch's house. And the other part of Covenstead that is my greatest joy. So that work is soul sucking, but for the greater good. And I'm willing to let my soul be sucked to do that so that I have the ability to hopefully influence policy that will impact tens of thousands of people.
Literally.
So hopefully, yeah. I mean, the things that we've done have already been life-saving, so I'm really excited to continue that work. The other piece is my house. So my beloved and I bought a village commercial building that was built in 1900. It's in the village of Nightville in South Portland, and it always used to be a bar on the bottom and then just like a boarding house above it.
Interesting. I had no idea. That
Yeah.
kind of makes sense now, though.
Yeah, that's why there's all the little rooms and stuff, because it was
Yeah.
always just a boarding house and then the bar. And it was a shipbuilding village. So like, you know, the guys would get off duty, they'd come, maybe they'd get too sloshed, they'd stay the night. So it's got a lot of history. And so when we got it, it was pretty almost condemnable. And we bought it in 2017 and have been meticulously restoring it and trying to undo many, many years of harm and make it safe. And now the space that used to be a bar is like a third space, like a communal shared space. And we host different artists and practitioners there to do that kind of like soul healing work, because the things that heal our soul are singing, dancing, art, food, like anything that you associate with like folk art, folk music, soul food, soul train dancing, anything that brings people together for those human shared experiences. And there's no hierarchy. You like art isn't ranked or anything. It's just like, how much of yourself are you pouring into your work? And so I seek out people who pour their heart and soul into what they do, which is how I found Prue. And then I just gift them space to try and perform or promote or share themselves with a greater audience. It's not a super big space, so it's invitational. And there's two reasons for that. One, I can only have so many people per the fire marshal. And two, I feel like, especially with people these days who are struggling to make friends, struggling with anxiety, struggling to understand whether or not they're welcome, there's a lot of self-excluding, of being like, oh, well, that's not for me, so I shouldn't do that. Or I don't know if that's going to be like the right vibe for me. So when I create invitational events and ask people to come, and then send a little reminder that's like, you are going to be so helpful because there's this other person who I think you're really going to click with, and they're a little nervous. You give people a reason to come, and then they're braver because they know that everyone in the room has been vetted by me, and they know that that they're needed. And so people love to have purpose and value and to be needed. So I love the invitational approach. I invite people in, and then we all get to have a shared experience, and then we can carry that with us into the world.
Yeah, I think at the beginning when I was like introduced to you, I think Prue said that I would click with your partner.
Oh yeah, similar energy. But you
So
also,
true.
you curate people really well. As far as I haven't met any of your friends who don't do not that you wouldn't be friends with someone who didn't do interesting things, but as far as like apothecaries, artists who work in like more deep like work, really, you
My
just,
mortician friend.
yes, you're able to pull people together who would really isolate themselves. And it's been a beautiful experience to meet your people and be in your space. Talking about Ruby Manor real quick, I mean, I had no idea it was in that bad of shape when you first arrived, but looking at it and like knowing the space's energy, you really put in the work, and the house, I believe the house appreciates it. And like you always say, it provides for you, but the energy of that is really, really beautiful. I didn't know how much history it had, but you really feel the love of the house loving you back, for sure. I do, at least. And it has great energy. I know anytime I walk in, I say, hi, Ruby. And anytime I leave, I'm like, okay, take care of yourself. And
This is very true.
and it's a warm space, and it is always transforming, and everything that you are moving towards is really exciting. It's exciting to see, it's exciting to be part of. I think it's going to be great for the community. I know I don't talk about this too much, but for me, being a trans woman, finding work was a real struggle. And even if I found the work feeling respected and seen there, it just wasn't happening. And so when you came into my life, I had really needed a chance to move forward and find something. And if those workplaces weren't giving me a chance or taking a chance on me, it was a time that I had to step back and take a chance on myself. And you also really, I mean, me and all of my clients and you have taken a chance on me in a way that makes me honored, really. I'm still really green. I mean, we talk to these other mediums and psychics, and they've been doing this for like a decade. I've noticed 10 years. It's almost like after 10 years, you're too big to be at these little fairs or talk to people. But I'm officially, I think, 1 year in, really, starting December, and with work I was doing with hosting parties, and yeah, it's a growing experience, but having the space and having people take a chance on you and being able to see yourself be able to do what you're passionate about. I mean, having that space it's invaluable to all of us. So,
Well, I so appreciate everything that you say take a chance, but I didn't feel like I was taking a chance on you. It was like a sure thing. I met you and I knew. I was like, this person needs to be part of whatever it is I'm building, because it is, like you said, fluid. It's always shifting and changing, because my goal is to be a shapeshifter that morphs to address the needs of my community. And that need has changed over time, but I knew I needed you, and like I never doubted for a second after we met that was the right choice, and like what has blossomed from this has been because of your presence in the space, because of you gifting your energy and your time and, you know, contributing to the space and feedback and creativity. Like, you cannot create things that are valuable in a vacuum. And being here by myself, because my beloved works, you know, outside the home, and I'm here just typing away on my computer, being a little government Barbie most of the day. It's so valuable to have other creative spirits because I was raised, you know, in a very working class family where the expectation was that I was going to exceed expectations academically and get good grades and get, you know, a good job, and creativity and you know, that was an extracurricular. So like being around other spiritual and creative people has been so regenerative and rejuvenating for me, and like affirming like that I do have good creative ideas, that I can, you know, like offer things beyond just what my brain can produce, and like that I can wade into these waters, and it's not so exclusionary, and I'm not going to be judged or critiqued or ripped apart. Like, you have been so uplifting and supportive while I attempt to create something unique and I don't know, something new in this little sleepy beach town.
Yeah, and it really, I mean, specifically, I don't even have to say it felt like it was a call, because I was meeting with professionals. They're like my mentors in this group that met the first Sunday of every month. It completely dissolved essentially after this, but one of the people there said that she found her space where she was going to be practicing. And I was like, oh man, you're so lucky. That's so cool. And she looked me dead in the eyes and she said, if you ask for a space to practice in, then the space is going to come to you in a way. And I think that I can't remember. It wasn't the solstice. It was one of the holiday parties that you had, which are based around the Sabbats. And I walked in, and I think it was like the next day after she said that, and the two of us just clicked, and the space was there. And I just,
spring one, I think.
Beltane, yeah, it was May.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fire.
Yeah. Yep. We did a fire ritual, and that was it. I was like, I can do ritual with this woman, and it feels so natural, because I've always been a solo practitioner. You know, like I've never really, especially being in social services, like I was always concerned, like it's totally chill to be Christian and a social worker. It's not super chill to be a witch and a social worker. People have judgments, and, you know, like there have been people who have been put in psych wards because of their mediumship. And like, so there has always been a certain level of fear and like remaining in the broom closet for me, of like not wanting to share publicly this part of my life. And so it's been such a joy whenever I find someone that I can just be myself with, and like inviting people to my parties that are celebrating the witch holidays is always nerve-wracking. So when James was like, I want to bring someone, I think you really want to meet her, I was like, okay, well, I trust James, and I don't think that James would bring anyone who is going to be too cruel. And quite the opposite. You are an absolute gem of a human, and our energy just aligns so well. And like I said, the progress that's been made in the space was because I knew that I could count on you to be there, and that I felt accountable to somebody outside of my relationship and Ruby, like that we wanted to make it nice for you, because it's so much easier to do for others than it is to do for yourself for whatever reason.
Yeah, truly.
And so making it nice for you and making it nice for the next event and trying to make it better and better and better, it has improved dramatically because I had an accountability buddy.
Yeah, same for me though. I mean, it's not that I go every Sunday. It's not that I have bookings constantly back to back. I think there was only one time that I was booked out for the whole week, but just being able to go there and bring my things, it's what got me online. It's what got me doing lives on Instagram. And I know I didn't even have a website really before the offering of Ruby Manor, and you said you'd be the first one, you'd get your first pick of the day.
Yeah,
and
no, I remember this. You sat down, created your website in about 2 days.
yeah, I was like, if this is something that I have a chance to do, then this is the chance that I'm going to take for sure. And I just can't, I can't even go into how much it's paid off. I mean, I'm kind of in a slow season, but I almost feel like that slow season has led to this, really, this trip, this energy that we're going through, and being able to reach out to people. The same with that group dissolving. It kind of dissolved on its own, but I'm still in connection with those mentors. Our first interview was with one of them. And so things happen when they need to happen. And then it's just a matter of being, and we talked about this in our last interview yesterday. It's just a matter of being open to each time someone offers you something and going through that journey step by step, because you never know where you're going to end up. But you know that if you take the chance, you might end up somewhere closer to where you want to be.
And I think a big part of our success together is that you have realistic expectations of me, where you understand like how thin I'm spread, and that like I do get deployed to, I'm going to be in Nevada next week, 2 weeks from now. I'm going to be in Ohio, then I'm going to be in Minnesota, then I'm going to be in DC. And like, I am not always present, but I need life to be occurring in the space when I'm not here. And like the trust that we were able to build, the communication, that like understanding that I might not be able to answer your texts right away, but then I'm going to respond with like 15 long blocks of text, and you'll be willing to receive that. Like, it's just been such a gift to find someone who's willing to accept the cycles of me, that like sometimes I'm present, sometimes I'm not, sometimes I'm communicative, sometimes I'm not. And I think that like a lot of people have unrealistic expectations based on, like the work day and work week that was invented by Henry Ford in the assembly line back in like the 30s. Like, you can just F off, like that's not natural. And I don't really operate that way, and not having to explain myself and just being unconditionally received and accepted by you was such a gift also, because it was scary to be like, I want to be in a committed, engagement with someone, but I don't have all of this time and energy to commit. And so the fact that you're so self-sufficient, you're a self-starter, you're a doer, you were like, awesome, I've got space, I'm going to bring this, this, and this. I'm going to have a website. You don't even have to worry about it. Like, I've got all of these skills that I can offer and contribute. And it wasn't like, one of the things that I struggle the most with is when people ask, how can I help? And it's like, I don't know what your capacity is. I don't know what your skills are. I don't know what your time limitations are. How am I supposed to know how you can help when I don't know what you are offering? And you were so clear about like, this is what I'd like to do. This is when I'd like to do it. This is what I'm going to bring. I'm going to expand my offerings. What do you think about this? And it was very collaborative in a really wholesome and holistic way that didn't require like pulling teeth. And I think that that is so impressive and so rare, and you should just pat yourself on your back for being such a like progressive self-starter.
I wouldn't even think of it that way. Yeah, I mean, and it takes people saying something like that to even be like, oh, I guess other people wouldn't have been able to do that, or wouldn't have had like the wherewithal to fight long enough, not to, the wherewithal to fight long enough to get through those jobs that didn't work out, and then take a chance on myself. I mean, it's a journey, but it's also just trusting yourself and trusting the process. I know I was actually really nervous to work with you, because you seem so grand. You seem like you do big work, and you are so confident, or you put up the necessary confidence to get through what you need to do professionally. And at first I was like, man, I hope that I'm able to rise to the occasion, really. Yeah.
But then you got to know me and realized that I'm just a goofy goober.
And a great sounding board. Oh my, there are times when I was like, I feel like I need to do this in order to like make it. And you'd be like, you're compromising your morals, or that would be pushing out of the spiritual kind of place that you're coming from. Stay true to it. And I think it helped me not sell out in trying to get to places. And that was huge, because I think if you don't have that sounding board of someone to be like, that's not in alignment with you, it's easy to just start compromising in ways that aren't really worth negotiating around, as far as, especially in the tech age, right? I mean, when we're dealing with just like AI and bots and this and that, it's a balance to figure out how to use that technology as a spiritual tool without caving and letting it take over. Really, it's a difficult balance, because at some point we're going to have to use that technology, we're going to have to work through things, but knowing that there's boundaries that I get to set for myself that are based off of my spiritual beliefs, and having someone keep that in check throughout this first year was really important.
I think the most divine attribute, and I want you to remember this, the most divine attribute is authenticity.
Yeah, that's what we've been, and that's really what we've been doing with this is, obviously we don't have nice big bro microphones or like high def cameras, but I think that genuine energy is going to resonate with people more than if we were just like scripting dumb jokes or being like, have you heard about this thing that we obviously talked about beforehand? You know what I mean? Not to be judging everyone else who's kind of doing that to make their living, because everyone's got to make their living, but staying genuine.
And that's the thing, is like, personally, I believe that you shouldn't have to make a living. We are living, and it shouldn't be that it costs like to live. And this brings me back to my suicide prevention work. Like, suicide prevention practices right now are deeply flawed. It's about preventing someone from dying in order to preserve the workforce. Because if you have too many dead people, there's not enough worker bees. And people are going to say that that's not how it's intended, but our suicide prevention practices are rooted in slavery. The first suicide prevention practices were started on the slave ships, when people were choosing to jump off the ships rather than, and so it's rooted in slavery, in racism, and we have to understand that restricting somebody's ability to act on their free will is not therapeutic. Yes, I'm not promoting suicide. I want to be very clear. I want everyone to want to be alive. I'm just saying, when someone is saying, I wish I was dead, you should say why, not how and when will you die, and then lock them up and push like a red button and have the police come. Like, there is a better way to do that. And it's really so important for people to have the ability to genuinely express themselves. And if they're in an environment that does not accept them for who they are, it's very isolating, and you can feel like you don't belong. And then that pervasive little message of, I'm not supposed to be here, can manifest into not wanting to be here physically on this earth. And so what do we do instead? We need to create spaces where you're invited, where you're welcome, where you're wanted, where you're loved, where you're cherished, where you're seen for who you are and appreciated for the unique gifts that you bring. And in our society where it costs money to live, there's so much value put on how much you can earn. And in this work, it's really, you're not supposed to sell your craft in witchcraft. You're supposed to just give freely and believe in abundance and believe that it's going to come back to you. I love that in theory, but I also need to afford to eat. And so do you. And so, like, how do you hold that truth of our spiritual practice and participate in a society where they have commoditized everything and made it so that you need to pay for water, pay for food, pay for shelter, pay for heat? Like, there just isn't enough free anything anymore. So it's really hard to believe in freely giving and receiving freely. So we have to make accommodations for the time in which we live, but we also can't do it in a way that causes moral injury or soul harm.
Yeah, I know for me, figuring out prices was a killer for me. I still offer sliding scale pay or whatever. I want to work with people. No one's reached out. And I said this in the last one, but again, if you're intimidated to reach out to a reader, just know that we want to do that work for you. And we got our emails right there. It's never a judgment. It's never a problem, at least for me, to work with people. But I honestly, I don't know that I would have been able to figure out ethical pricing for what I was doing if I didn't have my mentors and you kind of being like, it is what it is, that we all need to live. And everyone's doing the best they can. But if you don't value what you're doing, then you aren't really, and it's not this, but it's, you aren't valuing your life in a way, right? We need these resources, we need these things to work out. And as difficult as that is to kind of price out and mease out, the ethics of it is just difficult, especially when resources are not scarce, but they feel
Hard to come
scarce.
by because they're so expensive or out
Yeah.
of reach.
Restricted. The resources are restricted. They're restricted by the powers that be, and those powers in this current oligarchy are a certain few, and they dictate, like what is available to us. And I think that reminding ourselves that we have to do what it takes to survive, and survival has to come first, because that is, the point of being here. But we also need to remember that it's okay to ask for what you need and to lean on others. And I love that you offer sliding scale fee. Everyone who participates in Ruby Manor offers their services at a sliding scale, because we don't want to exclude anyone who needs care. And if someone can't afford something, it's important for us to find ways to support the practitioner so that those people can get care. Another thing that I always love is like offering people the opportunity to do a donation if they have more than enough that could support another person. Or if people can't pay, then in what other way could you participate or contribute? So if that's like having reading and then giving a phenomenal testimony, because that will then help promote your practice or business, like there are other ways that people can offer something in return that may not be financial. So just being creative about like what gifts people have to offer versus always just thinking about the bottom line and the scarcity mindset, that's how all economics is. The theory of economics is resources are scarce and we must collect and capitalize on them. But that is very like, it doesn't align with nature. Once again, like my nature-based faith comes through, but like depending on the season, there's an abundance of something. And if you have an abundance of something and you're lacking something else, perhaps somewhere else there is an abundance of the thing that you're missing. But we don't have those good community connections anymore to make those, to share our resources. So we have to be really mindful about how we bill ourselves and account for our time. And it's a challenge in this society to be a person who's trying to do things ethically and also doing soul work.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of professionals who say, because it's an energy exchange, as long as something is being given, then you are kind of authorized. I don't know that authorization is the right term, but there needs to be some kind of energy exchange. And I've heard, one of the things I liked the most that I heard was, even if you're bringing some oranges that you grew in your yard to someone, if you're bringing like a baked good, that's an energy exchange. Whatever you can do to show that you recognize someone's doing that work should be enough, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But unfortunately, sometimes you don't need oranges and you need to pay your rent. So in this society, and so in this society, it's a real challenge. But I think you bring up a really great point about that exchange of energy. And I want to mention something else that's core to the values of Covenstead, and that's consent. Like every engagement that I participate in is consensual. I will never, if someone's like, my loved one is really struggling, I want you to talk to them, I'm not going to outreach and say, you need to talk to me. It's like, please give them my contact information. And if they're interested, then they can reach out. And there are certain circumstances where people are very unwell and like are too, feel like too much of a burden to reach out. And so I'll do the first outreach. But if they don't want to hear from me, I stop. And the same with like our shared space, like I need to be on board with who's in the space and they need to be on board with there are certain rules to my space. It's a queer liberatory space. And so there's no hate speech, there's no acts of violence. Like, I'm very, very clear. This is my home, and I will protect it. And so, we need to all be in consenting agreement about the terms in which you are able to use the space or participate in our activities. And I think it's so important because every energy exchange really should be consensual.
Yeah, there's also something that you mentioned right when I started that was there's a certain amount of vetting that needs to happen in the occult community, because unfortunately some people use the occult or abuse the occult in ways that end up being kind of a quick jump to just like summarize the whole thing is you could be literally like Nazi-esque or have like some really problematic places you're coming from and look like you're just a spiritual person. And that like guys could really be damaging in the long run. And so that vetting, that like, I know for me, a lot of my clients are friends or personal people, but the vetting is really important. At first, it might seem like, well, why am I signing this document? Why am I like being accountable? But it really is that where there's damaging people who could be, even just the energy of the space, right? Not a physical damage to the space, but like something that makes everyone uncomfortable in a place that is a safe space is like somewhat, it's good to know that everyone who's involved in it is keeping an eye out for that.
Yeah. And that again comes back to the invitational approach of like how we're only open by invitation or chance. And like there's a few times where we'll just like open the door and let people in to be curious, because curiosity is so important as well. And it is very whimsical and magical inside Ruby Manor. Like, you do not know what to expect. And even on the outside of Ruby Manor, like it's got 3 red doors on a white, brick facade, and there's flower boxes, and there's a big old queer flag hanging in the window. And you're not really sure what's going on because it doesn't look like a house, but people live here. So it's very curious. And I love when people want to poke in and wonder about it. But the invitational approach is really primarily so that I can ensure that everybody who is there is safe, because it's so important for me that our space be trauma informed and have a liberation mindset and be really respectful of the fact that everyone is showing up here with their own journey, story, damage, and we need to be mindful and respectful of the fact that we all have certain triggers. And the other thing that's really important is accountability, is if something does not go well, or someone does something that is upsetting or offensive, that there are systems in place to address that. And I'm not afraid of having uncomfortable conversations. And I very much encourage folks to let me know if anything doesn't feel right. Because a lot of that too is just learning, because learning takes discomfort. And some folks might genuinely not know that what they did or said was inappropriate. And I spent 5 years as a nanny to preteens and teens, and I am very good at helping people understand what is appropriate versus inappropriate behavior. So I'm super comfortable nannying our society post-COVID, when we lost a lot of our social skills and maybe are uncomfortable because we don't know how to behave. Like, you can come here and learn how to act. I will tell you whether you are acting a fool or not.
And that's that sir energy that you bring to things, right? I mean, I definitely feel safer around you, or even just in your space, because I know for sure, actually, even out of your space, because you've expressed to me before that I've been kind of a victim of weaponization of the mental health system. And I know now that those same people who might try to harm me or put me in dangerous situations, that you'll be there if I need to call. And you have the background, the wherewithal, and the vocabulary, and the spiritual kind of drive to be able to protect us.
Absolutely. Yeah. You should always keep my number on hand, because I am who you want to talk to if you're ever in jail or held at the hospital without your will. Like, I am your go-to person, because I'm going to make sure that your dignity, your autonomy, and your personal voice and choice are upheld. You are a human being with rights, and we're going to make sure that no one is infringing on your basic human rights because of something that may or may not make them feel uncomfortable. Like, I don't care if you're comfortable with my humanity. I'm a human and I'm allowed. And yes, I do have that sir energy. I'm a former martial artist and I grew up with brothers and I was the leader of the neighborhood gang. So I will very happily put people in their place. And I do it kind of professionally. I tell these senior leaders that they can shove it because they're wrong. And I am a really good arguer. So I've found a way to capitalize on my argumentative, self-righteous on some level, soapbox moments. And that's what the work that supports the beauty and the joy that is Ruby Manor and the other arm of Covenstead.
I love that. Speaking of which, though,
Yeah.
Do you have any other thoughts or anything you want to share as far as experiences?
Experiences. Oh, I don't know what you want to hear about.
Oh, that's completely up to you. I will say one thing I want to jump to while we're talking about Covenstead is how can people support Covenstead? How can people reach out, donate, contact you?
That is a wonderful question. There's a couple ways you can donate if you're interested in donating. So I never charge for my death doula work, and other death doulas in the state probably find that irritating because they, again, are charging for their care. But because of the policy work that I do, I'm able to support the community care and cultural work. However, if we had more support, we could do more. I would really like to be able to start, something I'm trying to do is start an Alternatives to Suicide support group, which is a non-judgmental support group for people with suicidal ideation. I want to be able to pay the facilitators, though, because I believe that their time is valuable. In order to be a facilitator, you have to be a person who has had thoughts of suicide. So I think it's really important to uplift people with lived experience. So if you want to donate to help make the Alternative to Suicide support happen, you can donate on Venmo at Covenstead Innovations or on Cashapp just at Covenstead LLC. The other places you can, if you wanted to come to any of our upcoming events, you can email Ruby Manor at covensteadinnovations.org. And you can find the Ruby Manor events at rubymanorsopo.org. And yeah, I'm trying really hard to balance my federal policy work, state policy work, and creative work. So it's been a challenge. The other thing you can do is come volunteer, come be here in the space with me and help me to tend the space, make the calendars. If folks are good with, organizational stuff, I do the best I can, but I am a person who has ADHD and executive dysfunction, and I'm somehow the chief executive officer of 2 companies. So anyone who wants to support that is very welcome. Another thing that we do that I'm really proud of and super excited about and grateful that you posted about was our zine. We have kicked off our inaugural zine issue was at the winter solstice, and we'll be doing another one for the spring equinox. So if you know anyone who is an artist or creative or someone who just has something that they want to see in print, they can send that to me at Kiley at covensteadinnovations.org. And the theme for our equinox one is rebirth, and renewal. So if you have any art or poetry or prose that you want to add, I think that zines are a form of suicide prevention as well, because there's something really life affirming about seeing your name in print. So you can keep an eye out for the work that I'm doing in the state at the Suicide Mortality Review Committee. There's some legislative directives that are going through right now that if you wanted to come and offer testimony, we would welcome that. So if you have any questions, you can email me and I can get you connected. It's just, again, I don't know what people have to offer, but I pretty much have something for everyone. So no matter who you are, where you are on the journey, we could probably use your support.
Yeah. And you just made a website for Covenstead.
Yeah,
Correct.
well, the Covenstead website is covensteadinnovations.org. That one is just a quick little placeholder so people know who I am. That is going to be updated at some point. We made one for Ruby because she is the shining star of Covenstead, if we're being honest. So that's rubymanorsopo.org. And that explains more about what Covenstead is and our beautiful space. Gives you a little bit of history if you're a nerd and you want to know about our 125-year-old building. She's turning 125 this year. We're going to have a birthday. So you better mark your calendars. I don't know when exactly her birthday is. I need to go back to the registry of deeds and find out, but she's turning 125. We're really proud.
It's
So
amazing.
A
yeah,
century and a quarter. Wow.
You are really
I know.
keeping a piece of history alive.
I am. Yeah, this house was built by one of the first mayors of South Portland for his mother, who was the landlady who lived upstairs and did the boarding house and ran the bar.
Cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So cool.
actually a really great history.
I know. Yeah. And then it was owned by this woman in the like late 60s. Her name was Rebecca Rice, and she was a Jewish immigrant, and she used the space to house other immigrants and help them get their start. So it has like this beautiful feminist history of being owned by these badass, powerful women. And I think that that's just so cool.
Wow, what a good point. And now that's kind of what you're fostering there too.
Yeah.
That's awesome. And when
Listen,
it comes
Ruby
to
wants what she wants, and she has always wanted the first floor to be communal, and she has always wanted someone to live upstairs. And so we do our best to meet her needs.
and what I'll say too about volunteering is it's if you have the time, even if it's something like I don't know, even if you don't quite have the ability or you feel marginalized, like you will be respected in the space. Everyone is going to work to uplift you. And so just volunteering, even and no matter what you can do, is we're going to make sure that it's a spiritually affirming experience for you. So if you feel alone too, even if you don't think that you can do much, like, and you feel alone or isolated, make sure you come on in. Make sure that it's most of what happens there is free, or like you said, it's by donation based kind of stuff. So yeah, if you feel marginalized or alone, like there is a community for you there, and there's something for you to be able to contribute, and that I would believe for most people will be a pretty affirming community to be part of. So really don't hesitate to reach out to Kiley.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. I would love to invite more people in to see the space and have ideas. So like I said, my personal trainer has been training me in the space, and then she's like, oh, you could do a group class here. And I was like, you could do a group class here. And so now she is doing a group class in, and it's like those are the things where, I don't know how to fill all of the time. And so I'm always looking for people who are seeking, an opportunity to show their work, or, we could do a fashion pop-up. There's so much that could be done. It's just a matter of finding the right folks who have the right fit. And so if you think that you might be a good fit for using Ruby Manor or being part of the Covenstead community, I would love to meet you, hear from you. We already have, like Prue was saying, I have this habit of collecting fascinating people, fabulous, fascinating, really beautiful souls. And I am so, so grateful for all of the people in my life who participate, show up, and give of themselves. So if you want to be one of those people, we would absolutely love to meet.
This is awesome. This has been really beautiful. I think that we're hitting like an hour and a half. So
The time flew.
Flew by.
That's what I was saying. Like, we have just a few things that we like to ask or hit on, but most people really, I think, once they get the space, because this is about holding space for people who might, like you, like your work is about other people, and you might not get to share that story or have that story kind of immortalized. And so just being able to put it out there and hold space for you, I mean, that's so much of what we're doing.
It's so beautiful, and it's so thoughtful and kind of you to believe that my story is worth sharing.
Oh, 100%.
100%.
And pulling people towards like the organization and the community in general is how it's going to grow, and how people are going to have that space. I also think hearing from you about ways to prevent suicide by helping aspects of like life that's difficult, instead of addressing like an amorphous kind of mental thing that we assign to that feeling. I think people need to hear that. I think everybody can work more closely with their friends and family if they approach it from that.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of times what people need is a hug and maybe someone to help them clean their house. Sometimes people just need someone to come and cook a meal for them because the relentless slog of deciding what's for dinner every night just feels like too much. It's small things that can make a huge difference. Little thing, big impact. And so that's what we're all about here, is trying to figure out the best ways that we can provide life affirming conditions, opportunities, experiences, and create beauty and be human together. The most human things that I learned in anthropology is singing, dancing, and sharing meals. So
I'm glad you brought up food, because I was going to mention this. You guys have a beautiful, like, pretty industrial, commercial kind of kitchen that you guys have just made, and I think it's worth mentioning people who make food, who feel like they want to spiritually bring that or do a pop-up. Like, that is another option that if you're like into culinary stuff, it's definitely worth working with you too, because that kitchen deserves to have somebody in there. And you got a great dining room table. There's a lot, like a garden. There's a lot of potential there, really.
There really is. Yeah, we're working with the state right now, all of the licensing and whatever, to get our commercial kitchen certification so that we can cook for the community. It's a little bit like a hybrid between like a prep kitchen, soup kitchen, and a food pantry. Right now it's just like the office kitchen where we all keep our snacks, but we're hoping that we can, in the very near future, be creating meals and giving them out to our community members who are in need.
So if you can help with that, make sure you reach out. The last thing I'll ask you is, what kind of rabbit do you feel like you would be? I'll tell you, when I was thinking for you, I'm kind of torn between, like, and I guess this is the duality, right, of your kind of personality, but like a soft, small rabbit, or like a jackal-esque rabbit. Like, I almost see, like, I don't know if you've ever seen Watership Down.
Oh yeah.
But the Black Rabbit of Death.
I love that. I feel like in all things, I identify as bisexual, non-binary, which I don't love any of those terms because it all is the binary. So if you were to do the math, non-binary, bisexual, cross out the bis, you get non-nary sexual, which is not sexual. So I identify as sexual. So I'm sexual. And
that is
I'm going to put that on a t-shirt, the math equation. But I'm ambidextrous. I use both my left and right hand. Like, I'm in the middle of everything. So I think that I would probably be a soft little fuzzy, like calico rabbit who has escaped and is wild and is a little bit rough and tumble.
Oh yeah. The last person we talked to, I almost immediately, it was the man who read for me, right? And he was the man who said, "Do you mean rabbit or hare?" And we both immediately, after I asked him, he was like, "Oh, wild rabbit, wild hare." So we'll see what comes up as far as like duality, kind of. There's so many different types of rabbits, but it's hard to kind of picture them off the top of your head. I can kind of see it, like kind of like my girl, the girl that I adopted. Like,
yeah.
Just like Aldrin, yeah.
Yeah, like a domestic rabbit who's gotten toughened.
Yes, a hardened, sweet little thing. That's me.
I love that. All right, cool.
All right.
I'm going to stop recording, and then we can have a quick chat after. But thank you guys so much for coming on. This has been the Lucky Rabbits Talk Show, and you can find us on YouTube and Spotify. If you've made it this far, you found us somewhere. But I also have an Instagram, Prudent Readings, Prudent_readings. If you want to book a reading with me or learn more about me, prudentreadings.com is where you can find me. But yeah.
And yeah.
It's been fun.
Bye.
Bye.